As it relates to business, I think, sometimes business doesn't really pay much attention to the Public Service Commission until there's a massive effort to raise rates, a rate case, and that's when they begin to pay attention.
Welcome to the premiere edition of Hawthorn's new podcast, Across the Aisle. We're going to seek out and share informed, smart, insightful opinions from both sides of the aisle, reflecting Hawthorn's longstanding tradition and our focus on heavily regulated industries, particularly as they cope with state and local issues. Joining me for this premiere edition is our senior counselor and head of our utility practice, David Applebaum. David's joining us from Juno Beach, Florida. David is a survivor of a career at NextEra, before that Scythe Energy, and before that in major roles for Congressman and Governor Jim Florio. David, we could not have picked a better week to start this than with both the election and the excitement and interest about it. Tuesday saw stunning wins for the Democrats in governor and legislative races in New Jersey and in Virginia. The Democratic recovery of the Latino vote in New Jersey, Governor Sherrill's overperformance against Kamala Harris, even among African Americans. Governor-elect Spanberger taking Loudoun County in the D.C. suburbs of Virginia by more than 29 points to win by 15 points. Of course, Mamdani won mayor of New York with historic turnout, the highest in 56 years, got more than 50% of the vote, and put an end to the 50-year-old Cuomo family dynasty. The Democrats had sweeping wins in the Pennsylvania judicial races. Two staggering defeats happened in Georgia, where Democrats took out two of the Republican public utility commissioners, the first GOP commission defeat since 2000. And of course, there was the impressive nearly 2-1, 64-36 victory for Prop 50 redistricting in California, and a huge personal victory for Governor Newsom. It was a big, and if your thinking was constrained by the polls, somewhat surprising day, as the polls missed both direction and margin in a number of key races. What out of all of that is your most striking takeaway from what happened Tuesday?
John, and I would have said the same thing last year when the Republicans did extremely well. This year was obviously the opposite circumstance where Democrats did very well. I think it's important to remember during every election that the American voter is paying attention. They understand their own personal circumstances and family circumstances. They're very concerned about those, as they should be. They pay attention to what's going on in their communities and their state, and they're paying particular attention to what's going on in Washington and across the country. Never take for granted the intellect and the ability of the American voter to understand what's going on and to respond and to vote accordingly. It's our right as citizens, but it's refreshing to see it when it happens. And that, in my view, is not a surprise, but it's a sort of very positive outcome in terms of what happened last night.
Well, I think perhaps maybe the best example of that was up in the state of Maine, where there were two ballot issues on the ballot. One dealt with protection from gun abuse, and the other with proposed voter identification. The voters went to the polls, and they voted for one of those measures, 63-37, and voted against the other, 64-36. Those are two landslide outcomes in American politics. They happened on the same ballot, in the same election, The voters looking at one question and saying, yep, I believe in that. The other saying, no, I don't want that. Making very selective choices. Don't know if they were right, but they were certainly informed and discriminatory in their choices. Well, I think some of the fun we'll have with this podcast is drilling down, or to mix metaphors, getting deep into the weeds in specific states. In future weeks, we're going to be talking about Texas, Florida, California. But I thought it would be fun today for David and me to talk with experts on both New Jersey, which made every headline, and also Georgia, which a lot of people hadn't been watching or expecting. The 60-40 defeat of two public service commissioners, the first time Republicans have lost those offices in Georgia in this century, since 2000. David, let me ask you to introduce our first guest, Skip Cimino, the Dean of the Lobbying Corps in New Jersey. Whatever revolution transpired on Tuesday, ground zero was the state of New Jersey. Late polling the weekend before the election suggested that it could be almost a dead heat in the governor's race, and Governor-elect Sherrill won by 13 points, recovering Latino voters, African-American voters, running better with them than Kamala Harris did. And David, who in his own right is an expert on New Jersey, suggestion, we've invited one of his great friends and the Dean of the Lobbying Corps there to join us. David, let me turn to you to make the introduction and start the questions.
Thank you so much. John, with us, we have one of the true authorities, senior statesman on politics in New Jersey, Skip Cimino of Stevens and Lee Public Affairs. Renaissance man, former assemblyman, former commissioner of personnel, former CEO of a major engineering firm, Robert Wood Johnson, Hamilton Hospital System, former executive director of the New Jersey General Assembly, and that's just a few of Skip's notable bylines. I am proud to call him a friend of long standing. Skip, welcome. Thank you for being here. Help us make sense of what happened last night, particularly given that the polls in the waning days of this campaign were so tight, suggesting a very late evening, and that's not really what was borne out at all. Your thoughts?
For David, thank you. First, let me thank you and John for having me on the podcast here. I honestly believe what happened in the scheme of things in New Jersey was had a lot to do with the fact that we witnessed things at the federal level that had significant impacts on New Jerseyans. The president himself is under substantial water in New Jersey. The closing of a major project in New Jersey, the president taking away the funding for the Gateway project in New Jersey, that impacts the ability to develop new rail tunnels into New York City, which affects the economic impact of not only New York City, but also the northern part of the state. Regardless of whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, you ride those rails, those tunnels, particularly after the storm that occurred in 2012 with Sandy, have been continued for almost 100 years now and are being held together with the sticky paper and glue, quite frankly. And for him, after the approval had occurred, for him to pull back the funding on the gateway tunnels, I think was a major impact in terms of it. I think the second thing that occurred was, as it relates to New Jerseyans, given the immigrant population that exists in the state of New Jersey, was the witnessing of what was occurring throughout the country as people were being effectively thrown down to the ground. No one suggests that criminals should continue to live in our country if they're criminals, but at the same time, the pictures that were evident of women being thrown to the ground, children being pulled from cars or being left abandoned, that did not sit well with either the Latino populations or the Black populations in the state of New Jersey. So consequently, from that, what we witnessed last night was a county like Morris County, which is traditionally a Republican county in New Jersey, going Democratic. Gloucester County, which had gone heavily for Donald Trump in 2024, going back to its Democratic roots. The other counties in New Jersey, such as Salem, going Democratic, such that the machinations of the electorate were such that we found that only in the northwestern portion of the state and in the coastal counties of Monmouth and Ocean, where the Republican majorities held. Subsequently to that, we ended up with not only a significant win for Mikie Sherrill as the next governor of the state of New Jersey, but also with a number of assembly seats that had been traditional Republican seats also turning over and being turned over to the Democratic Party in the course of this election, and still a couple yet to be decided.
You know, Skip, probably 3 or 4 days ago when we last communicated, we were talking about the potential loss of maybe 3-4 seats in the assembly. And now we're looking at the possibility of picking up 3, 4, and 5. What does that mean in terms of, you know, Speaker Coughlin, who you obviously have been and continue to be close with? What does that mean in terms of how that chamber and how the legislature continues to operate going forward, and the relationship with the governor?
Yeah, I appreciate your question. As a matter of fact, I will share with you and John. I sent a text to my former boss this morning saying you need a bigger caucus room because you're going to have so many more members and what have you. I think what it says is that the speaker and the Senate president, and tomorrow I have no doubt that Craig will be elected to another term as speaker tomorrow in the caucus meeting. He's already historic in terms of the number of terms he has had as speaker. I expect him to get a 5th term here with that. But I think what it says is that the moderation that the party has utilized over the last term has been what has been productive for the party, and I believe that the party will, in large measure, continue on a moderate track. Mikie Sherrill is a moderate. She is not. She's very moderate in her approach to government. She's been as you both know, she's a graduate of the Naval Academy. She's an officer, having been an officer in my own career. At one point in time in the military, you learn certain disciplines, and I believe that she will carry those disciplines with her into the governorship, and I believe that she will negotiate well with the legislature, understanding that you do the doable and you don't try and exceed what can very well be done possibly. And let's just be honest about it. What she faces going into the job is going to be some challenging issues relative to a potential budget deficit, as well as needs for New Jersey Transit, as well as trying to get the energy crisis that exists in the state of New Jersey under control.
You just raised the energy issue, Skip, and a number of the companies that we work with, and I know a number of the companies that you work with in your business, are focused on energy issues in New Jersey. What's your sense? I mean, it's early, right? We're 24 hours, less than 24 hours after the results, but what's your sense as to what the results mean for the Board of Public Utilities, for new supply, for clean energy? And how does she deal with the angst of the rising cost of energy in the state? I mean, sometimes they seem like conflicting things. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, as she has articulated, I think that Mikie Sherrill will take an all of the above approach. So I believe that she will look at gas. I think that she will look at nuclear. I think there will be a place for renewables, but the whole world of New Jersey's energy future is not guaranteed to be merely in the area of renewable energy. I think at some point, candidly, that wind off the coast will come back, but it's not tomorrow's issue. New Jersey in 2018 was a net exporter of energy to the rest of the PJM grid. Today, we are a net importer of energy. The nuclear power plants that we have provide 40% of our energy. The balance of our energy comes from out of state. So consequently, we're paying severely for that. I believe she understands that. I believe that she will work in concert with the federal government to allow us to build more nuclear plants, SMRs, if you will, as well as to look at the increase in gas production in the state to resolve some of the very significant issues that we are facing. She will, on day one, I believe, honor her pledge to freeze rates day one. I've spoken with the speaker, and constitutionally, she can do that. So I do expect that the utility companies will see her freeze rates. I'm not saying they're going to like it, but at the same time, I think that that is what she will do on day one until she can get her arms around the significance of the problems to grow generation in New Jersey and to lead the state to a more equitable place relative to energy and the cost of energy for the people of the state.
You mentioned day one. I mean, obviously, when governors come into office for the first time and they look around and they get beyond the transition, they look at, 30-day plans, 90-day plans, 6-month plans. What's your sense? You talk to their folks and you've talked to their folks during the course of the campaign. What's your sense as to beyond energy? What does she hit the ground running with on day one or day 30 or day 90?
David, both of us have been here in terms of this, in terms of administrations and what have you. I think probably the most critical element for her is to deal with a budget. Certainly the Murphy administration will give her some level of blueprint. But as you well know, by the end of February, the first week of March, a governor must introduce a budget plan, and she's going to need to be able to introduce that budget plan. I also think that she's going to want to look at childcare and childcare credits as something that's going to be important for people so that people are capable of working. I think that she will keep the immigrant directive in place that the Attorney General and the governor have placed in the Murphy administration. And I think part of what she will do is immediately go to bat for New Jersey against the stuff that is coming out of Washington, D.C., in terms of what's happening to the state as it relates to Medicaid funding, which is, quite frankly, not just an issue for our residents, particularly our senior residents, but very, very important for our hospitals and what have you, and the impact on our hospitals and the loss of revenue for our hospitals.
Skip, with last question from me. Tom Martello, the reporter and longstanding observer of politics in our state, said that if not for Donald Trump, this may have been a far different outcome in terms of the results at the gubernatorial level and potentially even the assembly level. And care to offer any thoughts on that one?
I would share with both of you that Jack Ciattarelli is a nice man, and I've known Jack Ciattarelli for every bit of 10 to 12 years and what have you. I see him down Long Beach Island, and we'll go to breakfast at the same place, and we will converse. I think it was unfortunate for Jack Ciattarelli that he decided in the primary to align himself with Donald Trump. I don't think he had to do that. I think further for Jack is giving Trump an A in the middle of in the last debate, in the middle of the shutdown, and then the gateway situation, I think harmed Jack Ciattarelli. It's unusual for the Democratic Party to have gotten a third administration. This has not happened since 1961, when Richard Hughes took the governorship from Robert Minor. So this is a highly unusual thing. And candidly, this is the first Democratic woman to take this position. So, and we're talking about someone who's extraordinarily intelligent, Mikie Sherrill. She's got a great background, as you both know, as a helicopter pilot, and also someone who's been a federal prosecutor, mother of 4, and all that. But, very unusual, and David, you know this, very unusual for someone to run for the first time in a gubernatorial race in this state and to win going out the door the first time because of the bifurcated media markets that exist in this state between Philadelphia and New York. Highly unusual. So they put together an extraordinary game plan. They worked it well. And with my friend Jack Ciattarelli, his team did not do as well as it possibly could. And I attribute a large part of that loss to the aspects of the shutdown and Donald Trump and those kinds of things.
Yeah, Skip, I mean, I will certainly add that we are not always blessed, but we were certainly blessed this time around to have quality candidates and a real choice. And that's truly a positive for the state of New Jersey and hopefully going forward. Certainly a positive for Mikie Sherrill. And we're blessed even further to have had you on the podcast today. I can't thank you enough for coming on. John and I certainly appreciate your being here and look forward to having further discussions with you about New Jersey and beyond. Go ahead, John.
David, let me pose, if I could just impose one more question on Skip. There's a minor suburb of New Jersey to the north called New York City. The three of us are of an age, we've seen a lot of rising stars and flashing lights appear in politics, and I'm sure we've all confused a dying meteor for a rising sun. From what you've seen of Mamdani, can he govern New York City? What has he got to do and to build something on the ash heap of Cuomo and Adams?
I think that's an excellent question, John. And I'm not surprised that a gentleman with your background and knowledge would ask that question, quite frankly. From my perspective, I think that Mondami, I think once he's sworn into office and once he understands some of the restraints of office, as we all have come to know and deal with, that he will need realistically to move more from the I'm not saying he's going to give up all of his progressive values, because I don't think he will, but I think he's going to have to find himself moving more towards the center than where he's been. He's already announced that he is not going to support defunding the police any longer. Lord knows he's going to need a strong police department in the city of New York. It's one of the finest police departments in the country. So I believe that we'll see change in Mondami. The one thing that I think is interesting about Mondami is the energy he generated among younger people and a new generation of people. And from my perspective, I think that's healthy for our country. We need young people to be like you and David and I, to be invested in what is good for America. I think that's very, very important.
Skip, you remind me of President Johnson's line, politics is the art of the possible. And the successful leaders figure that out. Well, Skip, thank you very, very much. We're honored to have had you on our premiere podcast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great to see both of you. Have a great day. Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
See you. Bye-bye.
I think one of the things the chattering political class largely overlooked going into this election, with the exception of Charlie Cook, who of course spotted it, was the Public Service Commission races in 2 districts in Georgia. Strangely there, although the commissioners have to live in their district, the vote is statewide on each of the districts. And fairly shocking history was made this week. The 2 incumbent Republican commissioners were both defeated, and by a landslide margin in American politics of almost 60-40. It's the first time a Republican has lost a seat on the Georgia Commission since 2000, 25 years ago. It certainly came as a shock to me, and I've spent most of my career working on utility issues in the South. One of the first people I met in the early days of that career, when both of us had more hair and it was black, was Craig Lesser, one of the rising stars then at Georgia Power, who went on to head government affairs, play a major executive role for the Southern Company, serve as head of the State Office of Economic Development for Governor Perdue for the state of Georgia, and is now a much sought-after consultant. We're honored to have Craig on the program with David and me, and Craig, you more than anyone, I think, are equipped to answer the question, not only what happened in Georgia, we've read the results, why did it happen? How could this come to be?
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for the invitation, you and David. It's good to see you both. What happened in Georgia and why did it happen? I think there's a baseline. There's 2 things that struck me this morning when I found out the results. One was what we're seeing across the country. And in my view, it's contrary to his public comments this morning. Trump was on the agenda. He was on the ballot everywhere. And instead of aspiration, which we always like in elections, in candidates, we saw rejection, a rejection of what was going on. So I think we have to look at that baseline. I think as part of that baseline is not only the economics, which really does relate to the specifics in Georgia, but the tonal quality. I think, John, you remember a CEO we had at Georgia Power and Southern Company named Bill Dahlberg. And, about 20 years ago, he said, normal ain't coming back. Well, I think there's a yearning for normal after even just the last 9 or 10 months, a yearning for normal, to not be seeing 3 headlines every morning with something new coming out of the White House, not seeing the destruction of the East Wing of the White House, and go on with the kinds of things we are all familiar with over the last months. Then we look at Georgia, and we look at the history in Georgia, and you mentioned that it's been 25 years since a Democrat was elected to the Public Service Commission or so. A lot of things have happened in Georgia. 20 years, a solid 20 years of supreme Republican rule at all levels of government in Georgia. The pendulum goes both ways. And I think all of the things on the national level, as well as the issues of, I think, I may be wrong, John, you may have the number right, but I believe there were 6 or so rate increases in the last few years, amounting to about $500. That's a lot of money. And given the economy, while things in Georgia have typically been good from an economic development perspective, all governors, Republican and Democrat, have always counted economic development as their number one issue, providing jobs. And to his credit, Governor Kemp has done that well. But an interesting thing has played in as their recruitment for new jobs has come in. It's been battery makers. It's been cloud institutions that hold cloud initiatives. It's AI. These are big, massive consumers of electricity. And while on the good side, they just in the last year and a half, 2 years, were able to get Vogel's 3 and 4 nuclear units into operation, which provides consistent reliability, which has been a stalwart for Georgia for a long time. The fact of the matter is, who's paying for that? And there's a fine line, I think, between getting these jobs for the new businesses that come in and for the people who already live there paying the bill, who say, I'm not getting a new job. I've got my job, but I'm paying a lot more money now. So I think all of that came into play. How the vote was in Metro Atlanta versus what kind of turnout there was south of Macon, I think is going to be very important to look at, to see if rural Georgia came out or if rural Georgia stayed home. I think having at least one of the candidates being a Metro Atlanta candidate was very important in bringing out that vote, and I think an African American. And it may turn out that was part of the response as well. But we'll have to wait and see what those specific numbers are from each district.
Craig, put your utility executive hat on as well as your economic development one. You're about to have 2 Democrats on a 5-member commission. A 3rd Republican is up for re-election next year, Commissioner Pridemore. What's this going to mean to business, to industry, not just Georgia Power and Southern Company, but to all business and to the state's ability to attract new business?
Well, it's a great question because typically the commission has been received by business in the state, especially larger business, larger employers, as being a very positive place to do business. That combined, again, with the efforts that I suggested of Governor Kemp and preceding governors to attract business to the state. Economic development's always been important. The commission heretofore has been very positive about supporting that notion of jobs and economic development. But I think with new commissioners, first of all, it's unknown how they are going to execute their positions. We really don't know. As we all know, campaigns are one thing, but once somebody is in office, how do they act? I think one of the issues that I think is important for Georgia Power is, have they forgotten how to work with Democrats? They haven't really had to do that at any level for the last 20 or so years. And, did they make any inroads, for instance, earlier this year, in at least keeping the door open with the Democratic candidates? Did they work on that? Or are they scurrying to create that today? Did they anticipate that the incumbents were going to win no matter what? Typically, they stay strong with incumbents in virtually any race. But the fact is, there were signs early on that the numbers were changing a little bit. Were they active enough in making sure the door was open for at least conversations with the Democratic candidates? I don't know. We'll soon see. Certainly there will be, if not already this morning, those conversations. But I think they're scurrying a little bit. As it relates to business, I think, sometimes business doesn't really pay much attention to the Public Service Commission until there's a massive effort to raise rates, a rate case. And that's when they begin to pay attention. For years, it's been very difficult to support campaigns of commissioners to get revenue, to get campaign contributions from business, because they haven't always been able to match the reliability and the responsible rates that they've set over the years to be connected to economic development and the financial status of the state, the economic status. So I think there's a lot of work to be done clearly. Is it going to be a little bit more challenging over certainly the next year or two? I would remind you that Commissioner Tim Echols, when he was elected some years ago, there was a lot of head scratching, a lot of concern about some of the things he wanted to do. Yes, a Republican, but in fact, some of his ideas were really not along the typical Republican philosophy. So over time, they were able to get him to understand what was important in keeping rates moderate and keeping reliability high. So I think time will tell, obviously, but I think they'll work hard at it. What does it mean? I mean, it's a time over the next year, certainly, as we see, is there any particular rate case, or is there a particular issue coming up? I can't answer that for the near term. But what I can say is it's now a split commission with Bubba McDonald, probably maybe the longest holding commissioner, and the oldest, I would add, by a significant number of years, as the swing vote, if you will. And he typically has not been a good friend to the utilities, even though he's a Republican. So there's a lot to be concerned about over the next months and years. But I think if the power company and the business community realize that there's always a way, Georgia Power is not going away. They do provide a great contribution to the state's economy, working with the state in economic development. So I'm confident that things will work out. They may not work out the same way they have over the last 20 years, but Georgia's not going to be an extreme state in any way in regard to the Public Service Commission.
Speaking of commissions, while you're deeply rooted in Georgia, you're a New Yorker who now lives in Nashville and works all over the world. As you look across the 14 commission seats that are up in 9 states next year, including Commissioner Pridemore in Georgia, do you see other revolts coming like what happened in Georgia?
I do. And personally, my opinion is people have to separate themselves from Trump. Trump's not going to stop doing what he's doing every day. That's not his DNA. So the other side of the equation is, well, how do you react to that, and how do you position yourself? I have Republican friends that are looking at statewide office next year. I have not talked to Tricia about her position, but I've talked to some others that are running. And my belief is they're going to have to separate themselves in some fashion from Trump, because clearly he is going to continue to be the top 3 headlines every single day. That's who he is. That's what he'll do. I don't think he's going to back off and all of a sudden become a more moderate fellow who's going to back off from doing the things that he's been doing. You can't rebuild the East Wing of the White House. There are just some things that cannot be reversed, and I think he'll continue on the track that he's on. So my basic belief is, no matter what they do, no matter what they say about Public Service Commission policy, the issue is, can you separate yourself from Trump?
Well, let me, as a final question, ask you more generally about the Republican Party. If you were advising Republicans, looking at what happened in Georgia yesterday, at Virginia, at New Jersey, New York City, the Maine ballot issues, the Texas ballot issues, California, what would you tell the Republican Party, or what questions would you ask?
Are you an American, or are you a Republican first? This is a time for leadership. This is a time to say no mas. And if they want to, I think, retain positions, get reelected, and I'm not saying a total reversal from any of the things. I mean, look, we all agree that, immigration is an important issue. All of these things are important. It's the how. It's the insults. It's the aggressive behavior on a personal level to people. It's the actions that we find distasteful. It's a cultural thing. Americans are good people. We're good people. We don't like to see people not having the food stamps that they need and want. We want them to have food. We want them to do all of that. I think the issue is, how do we separate ourselves in a way that is, A, going to offend Trump, and he will respond with his retribution. But there comes a point, I think, where the American people will say, Trump, you feel that way. We understand, but we're not there anymore. We've seen what you've done, and it's time to move on.
Craig, thank you very much. We've been blessed to talk with Craig Lesser in Nashville, the founding chairman of the Pendleton Group in Atlanta, and longtime friend and wise expert on the utility industry and all things politic in Georgia. Craig, thank you.
You're too kind. Thank you both very much.
We're grateful to Skip Cimino and to Craig Lesser for their insights on New Jersey, on Georgia, and on this game we call American politics. And I'm always grateful, as I have been over the decades, for David Applebaum. We hope you'll join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about what this election meant and what's going to happen in 2026 with the great political prognosticator Charlie Cook, a podcast that will be coming to you from Five Star Hunting Preserve in Kellyton, Alabama, where Charlie and I will be in 2 rocking chairs on the front porch while the other more vigorous members of the party are out shooting birds. But we look forward to visiting with you from across the aisle.